Hi guys, welcome back to Two Worlds Collide podcast. On today's episode, we have Angie Jones. She's a fierce women's rights advocate who has been on the front line in one of the most important fights of our time, protecting women's rights, women's spaces, and women's sports from being erased by ideology. She has stood tall through media attacks, online abuse, and political pressure because she believes that women and girls deserve safety, fairness, and a voice. I hope you guys enjoy. And I was just talking to you before off air about a situation that happened last weekend when I was in Adelaide. Went out to lunch with me, my wife, and my little daughter, and two men walked in dressed up as women in disguise, and they sat across the table from us. Now these weren't people that had like transitioned for years and years and years. You know, they were blatant men, Adam's apples, like real hairy arms. They were men. You could just tell from a mile away. And my wife went up to go to the toilet, and then I got up as well and had my baby in our arms. And I walked up to guard the door at the toilet. And my wife said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Well, I'm not going to let these men go into the same space as you, as you're using a toilet facility. Like, you have earned the right to have that safe space." And then she goes, "Sam, I don't want you to do that." And I said, "Well, unlucky, I'm doing it." Because there's also a thing called autogynephilia, where men dress up as women and they get aroused on it. So I'm not going to risk a moment in life which could affect us forever and ever, and potentially land me in a lot of trouble if I end up acting on this, if something happens in there, and just for the safety of my own wife. But I'm not going to risk her walking in with a male that's potentially all jacked up because he's dressed up as a female and he has autogynephilia, and then he acts on that when he's in there and tries to do something to my wife that I would probably end up killing him for. So I think we're in a society now where and also as well, it's happened to me a lot of times, where you push back on this stuff, you're transphobic. But realistically, no, I've got common sense, and I just want to protect my family, my wife, my daughters, hopefully. I have a bunch of them and a bunch of kids as well. But, it just seems like we're in this weird shape of society, and a lot of these like weird laws like DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion. I mean, it sounds great on face value, but when you get the inclusion part and we're letting males openly go into female places, all because we need to be inclusive, it's like, well, what about the 99% of us that are all, hang on, like, well, I have to surrender my rights and my freedoms or my female spaces to be inclusive of what, like a 0.01% of the population, or even more. That's growing, right? That figure's growing. The same thing with DEI in the machete crisis over in Melbourne. Like, we need to be now inclusive of offenders running around with machetes, because we need to feel sorry for them. We need to make sure they get into these rejuvenation programs, or we can heal them. It's like, no, we need to get them out, and we need to throw them in prison. So I guess as a overarching question, and I always ask myself this question all the time, like, where did we go wrong with this stuff? Like, can you draw back to a position where it's like, where did this stuff become normal in our society? Okay.
Oh, yeah. Well, it started, trans has been around, the last, 30, 40, 50 years, but it was always accepted. There was two types of trans people. There were men who were homosexual and very effeminate and uncomfortable within themselves as gay men. And they said, well, I can't handle being a gay man, so I'm going to, I know I'm not a woman, but I'm going to live as a woman and take the role of a woman because I'm more comfortable with that. Mm-hmm. So there was those, and they were the transsexuals, and those men usually had full reassignment surgery. And there was an illusion that women didn't mind those men in their spaces. We always minded, but we made concessions for them because they were gay men. Mm-hmm. And then there was the other type, which was your transvestites, which were the sexual fetishists. Yep. Now, transvestites have been around forever as well. Well, modern forever. But they were clearly transvestites because they wore the suggestive, clothing. They had a hypersexualization about them, and they were part-time. Mm. Most of them led double lives as family men and workers. And then on the weekends...
Dean Laidley was...
Dean Lady was probably a transvestite that used to get off on wearing women's underpants. Yeah. And then when he was caught by the police, he decided, I'm going to be a perpetual victim, and I'm going to claim that I'm trans, so then everyone will pity me.
And they gave him Woman of the Year or something.
Yeah, and the police actually invited him to speak at the police academy to new recruits about how to better treat trans people.
A drug dealer and a stalker.
A drug dealer, stalker, like a domestic violence perp, got preferential treatment. He got hundreds of thousands of dollars in compensations because cops they didn't deliberately leak his photos to the public. They leaked them within each other and someone shared them with a journalist. So the cops didn't intend to make those pictures public. Just one of their friends was a rat and he shared it with a journalist. And so, you know, because of the humiliation, which he has lapped up every moment since, then, you know, this guy's got this status in society that is a lot greater than any other woman, but his victim was completely forgotten in all of this.
Yeah.
And I think of her, you know, I'm thinking about this woman, and multiple women were stalked by him and were terrified of him, and now he's being lauded as a victim, as someone who's really progressive and admirable. It just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I think, and this is where this society is going, what I was talking about before. We're really being inclusive of these people that are now really suffocating any rights which women fought for so hard for so long for. I know I did a reel about this the other day with a sex discrimination officer or commissioner, whatever, some bureaucrat that gets paid $400,000 a year. She couldn't even define what a biological male is. Now, if I sit back and look at that and I think to myself, okay, if you can't define what a biological male is, the future of my little daughter, the person that is meant to be standing up writing rules to protect her in our society, if you can't identify what a biological male is, or you don't understand the question, then what's going to happen to my daughter in female-only spaces? What's going to happen to my daughter in female sports? And then what's going to happen to my daughter in society that is meant to be protecting women, not flooding them with a bunch of males in female-only spaces? Like, do you look at something like that and just feel disgusted?
She knows what a man is and she knows what a woman is. She's deliberately obfuscating the facts because her employment is dependent on her going along with an ideology.
So you reckon someone's pulling the strings behind?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. She was appointed to that role because she is part of the cult.
Yeah.
And the thing that, when you strip it down to bare facts, you know, we accept that because of the behaviour of a minority of men, we need female-only spaces to keep women safe from those men. Now, why all of a sudden do some of those bad men and some of the good men put on a dress and get to come into those spaces? It doesn't make any sense. And it's also an opportunity for the worst men to change the rules and say, I'm a woman, I'm entitled to everything that women have. It's terrifying. And that's what's happening because, you know, only now after years, self-ID in Victoria, where I'm from, has been in since 2017. And
what do you mean by self-ID?
Self-ID is that anyone who says there's trans is trans. They don't have to change anything about themselves. They don't have to legally change their documents. They don't have to have surgery. They don't have to have hormones. They don't even have to put on female clothes. If I'm trans, I'm trans.
So I can say I'm trans tomorrow and then enter female-only spaces?
Yes. It would actually help if you did, like, put some earrings on or something like that. But that's the very least that you have to do. So
what about, let me ask, hypothetical, what if I said that I'm a dog or a cat and now I need a litter in the corner? If I'm if I'm a little kid in a classroom, I now need a litter spot in the corner because I identify as a cat. Like, is this how far this goes?
Well, it's ridiculous. And in some circles, your wishes would be respected.
Wow.
Not many, but some. But, you know, this is the thing. The people, not all of the people that are involved in this ideology are bad, but it attracts bad people. The Catholic Church was infiltrated by men who had, you know, nefarious interests in children.
Pedophilic behaviour.
That is exactly right. Why is it hard to believe that men, similarly, now the church has been exposed, will attach themselves to the, you know, LGBTQI++ group for the same reason? Particularly when that group encompasses elderly transvestites and small children.
Yeah, I guess because you were saying before you used to vote quite hard left or Greens years ago.
I would vote Labor Green. The first, you know, all the years I voted, it was Labor Green, Labor Green.
I heard an interview with the Greens, the old Greens minister, Liberal, runner of the party, whatever he was. I heard an interview about him, or him doing an interview maybe a month or two ago, and he was one, and I think he got kicked out of the Greens party because he said the Greens have actually been somehow ideologically overtaken by this like weird cult, because the Greens used to be like, we're going to represent the environment, we're going to speak out for the environment, and we're going to speak out for, you know, the people as well, uni students, all this stuff. But it's been like it's been overrun by this cult-like figure. Is that something that you think?
That's Drew Hutton, and he co-founded the Greens with Bob Brown.
That's the guy, yeah.
And he founded the Queensland Greens, and the Queensland Greens have kicked him out.
Yeah.
And Bob hasn't stuck up for him. Or he has, like, sort of wishy-washy kind of way, but he hasn't come out and said, this is ridiculous. You know, what are you doing? He founded this party. But the Greens have diverted completely away from caring about the environment. They vote with Labor against the environment, and they have turned into the social justice party. Mm. You know, we've got Greens politicians wearing, you know, Palestine flags. We've got Greens politicians wearing the rainbow lanyards and stuff in Parliament. It's crazy.
Yeah.
But Melbourne sent the Greens a very strong message by sacking the leader of the Melbourne Greens. So that was great. Yeah,
that was good. What was his name?
Adam Bant.
Yeah. That was good when he, left that. But it's just... Yeah, I just think that the Greens have just been overrun by this ideologically cult, and they've actually started to overrun our schools and universities as well. Like we hear about gender studies now being taught as young as, look, I'm not going to assume anything, but they're being taught at schools and universities, and I had Rennick on here last week. And he said that kids are coming out of university just broken, brainwashed. Do you think there's a massive problem in our schooling systems, university systems, with this type of teaching? Yeah, well, I think I started to notice it when universities became private companies. So they stopped being run by the state and they began being run as like a commercial entity. Mm-hmm. And that's when they started charging fees, and people like myself from a working class background were denied the opportunity to go to a university. Yeah. Now, where I live in Melbourne's outer suburbs, 1 or 2 kids out of 100 will go to university. Yeah, okay. That's common, you know. And back when I was a kid, there'd still only be like, you know, out of a class of 100, maybe 20 kids that would go on and get a university degree because it was free. But there was more representation of people from all different backgrounds. And now university is a luxury. It is a luxury of wealthy people and overseas students who can afford to attend our universities. And what's happened, the commercial arrangements that universities are making is what is guiding what they're teaching the kids. Mm. So they're behind the scenes. There will be commercial arrangements with research companies, with, you know, large companies, and they will be influencing what kids are taught. And then they bring in ideological stuff as a distraction from not teaching what they should be taught. Mm. So they come out of university thinking that what is important is fighting foreign wars, fighting, for trans rights, which is basically men's rights and not the best of men's rights, fighting for, the environment, but to a degree that's not based in reality. Like they will... like the example of Greta and her cronies throwing the plastic containers into the sea with cash in them. Mm. They're so ignorant of what the world's actually like, and what they don't really know what they're fighting. Delusional.
Completely. Mm. So yeah, these kids, and they haven't had the life experience to show them that what they've been taught is rubbish.
You just said before an interesting thing that I want to dive into. Trans rights is men's rights. Explain that to me.
Well, when you think of trans, we're not talking about women going into men's sport. We're not talking about, the fact that a lot of women who in adulthood transition are butch lesbians. Mm-hmm. And, that what in society makes them think that they're actually men when it's very obvious that they're not. There's not calls for them to be included in the things that men do. It all is focused on the men, and particularly the theatrical, over-the-top men, not the ones who just quietly want to go and get about their lives, the transsexuals of old. It's about these fetishistic men who want to impose their ideology on everybody, and not just impose it, but they want to go into women's toilets and take photos. They want the affirmation, they want the adulation that comes with being trans. It's lucrative for them. It feeds their narcissism, because you'd have to be an absolute and utter narcissist to think that you're entitled to do that. So I think, it's the kind of men, but it's the worst of men who want to do this. And that's evidenced on the internet.
Yeah. I think because there's some massive profiles out there that have millions of followers.
Yes.
Especially over in America, right? They're big. I don't even know the names of these guys, but especially during the Joe Biden era, they paraded around like they were, the gift to the world from whatever satanic, demonic force they came from. And they paraded around like everyone needs to be able to understand what they're going through. And it's like, guy, everyone is living their lives. Like, I actually don't care what you do, but if you try and go into a female in his space, and I'm going to say something about it. But a lot of these people as well, they seem to be putting messaging out there to a younger generation and being like, if you think you're trans and your parents tell you no, then they're wrong. And it's like, hang on, at what point now are we stepping into the line of letting a parent be able to do what they think is right and bring up a kid with their morals and their backgrounds and their beliefs? Now, this big social media online thing, it is an issue with kids getting taken down different avenues of stuff like that. Do you think that social media and online presence has had a bit of a play in this weird sort of trans world? Yeah,
definitely, it's huge. But the thing that I notice most is, why are they targeting kids? They're targeting kids. They're trying to convince people that you are born trans, in the same way that gay and lesbian people are born innately with an attraction to the opposite sex, to the same sex. Like when they reach maturity, it's like, oh, I'm attracted to the same sex, not the opposite sex, like the majority of people. So they're trying to create this illusion that trans people have been born this way. So the only way that a man like my former father-in-law, who decided at 65 years old that he was going to become a woman, the only way they can legitimise those men, those fetishists, is by creating the concept of the trans child. And so they've been very clever with their marketing, because if you notice, the marketing for young people targets the demographic from 12 to 26. So any event that local councils or schools or anyone runs, 12 to 26. So you've got the teenagers who are easily victims to social contagion and what's cool and what's fashionable and whatever. And then they're dragging in the children into that. And then you've got the older ones grooming the teenagers and grooming the children to think that, trans is a great thing and it's all positive and you're part of our community. And they're particularly targeting vulnerable children, like children who may be autistic, or who are, same-sex attracted, like young people who are same-sex attracted, or who are on the autism spectrum, who already have a feeling that they're not the same, that they don't belong. And these vultures, these older young adult vultures, because when you're a teenager, you look up to people in your 20s, and when you're a kid, you look up to teenagers. And so it's this like grooming chain that has all been put in place to legitimise the trans adult, who is the male fetishist who decides one day overnight, I think I'm going to become a woman, because he's watched so much porn that he likes to be how he views women, which is, objectified and subjugated as a less valuable person. Like he likes that happening to himself, so he must be a woman, as if we all have that, we all feel like that. To justify him, they've got to groom the kids into it. And they've been very evil in what they've done, because they've convinced parents that if you don't affirm your child will suicide. Now, we had the Victorian Premier on the TV the other day saying that lie, that, that kids will kill themselves if they don't get access to medicalisation. Yeah, and that is a lie. Yeah,
she said that trans kids are 13 times more likely to commit suicide.
That's not true.
And straight away I thought to myself, if you think that's true for the Premier of Victoria, wouldn't it be then trans like normal kids are less or 13 times less likely to commit suicide? Like, so if we're forcing kids to be trans, then we're inevitably saying to ourselves, okay, well, they now have a 13 times more likely risk of committing suicide because we've let them transition or let them be trans.
Or if you tell them they're going to suicide. Like, if you put it in your head, if you don't get what you want, you're going to kill yourself. Of course kids are going to think that. They're kids. So they're basically creating the thing that they say they're trying to stamp out. But none of it's, like the Cass Review in the UK looked into those suicide statistics and they're all false. The kids who identify as trans have the same suicide rate as children who are on the autism spectrum and children who are, on the lesbian or gay or bisexual. They have the same, because they have that feeling, oh, something must be wrong with me when they're growing up. And yet this lie is being perpetuated by our politicians, by the national broadcaster, by a whole bunch of media. It's child abuse. Yeah,
I've seen as well a graph, and this probably shows that how much government manipulation has over the people. There was a graph in America where when the Joe Biden-Harris era, there was a substantial amount of young people that were turning over to trans, and there's a graph. And then when Trump and Vance came in, that now has drifted down so low that it was at levels of like 10 years ago of kids. So to me, that just shows, well, governments have a huge say in the policies they push down, the messaging they push down, and the wording and paragraphs they push down onto people about, what is happening within our community, what's accepted and stuff like that. So, and obviously they have control over public schools, what's being taught in there, Parliament House, what politicians are saying. I think this is, enormously dangerous, enormously dangerous. And yeah, I don't know where we've went wrong, because the problem is in Australian politics at the moment, like the Liberals came in, like Susan Ley and the moderates, they're just like the Tills. I've always said that Susan Ley is literally a Tills member in a blue suit. Like, if she came in now, nothing would change. So do you think, more of a political stance, and I know before you mentioned that you actually don't vote. Did you vote?
Well, last time, and I found it really difficult because I believe that everyone should vote. I couldn't vote. I literally got there and froze with my pen and I couldn't vote. Yeah. I couldn't do it.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Because I'm from the left and I don't see another option. I don't have any faith. And I think...
Would you not vote far right? Do you not...
No.
Nah. So
I can't vote far right because the furthest right want to erase some of my other rights. So,
okay.
I can't...
What's that? Tell me that. I'm really interested in this. Tell me that.
I couldn't vote for One Nation because it was One Nation that pressured John Howard to change the way that they view custody after separation.
Okay.
And now it's usually from the position of 50-50. And for older kids, that's fine. But when it comes to small children, parents should be able to negotiate a time that suits both the parents and the child. And I know in some ways this was brought in because parents couldn't negotiate, because if you end up in court, it's because you can't negotiate. But it really made things difficult for women because men were able to hold down work and have their children, because a lot of them repartnered. And had family support and whatever, so they could still maintain their work, their personal life, whatever. And then women who were lower paid generally were unable to provide enough financial support for their kids, and they had to create a situation where they work 1 week and work week on 1 week on and 1 week off, and they just couldn't do it. They just couldn't do it. So it created a real problem where now you see a huge disparagement in the income and the potential income of women who've raised their children as a single parent compared to fathers who's raised their children as a single parent and who've been able to maintain their life as it was before, and women have had to give it up. So women are putting away 10 years of their life to raise kids and coming out of it and they're unemployable because they're heading into middle age. So, and then men are able to maintain. So this idea that everything is 50-50, when men have advantages as far as particularly income and also with the support, because everyone goes, oh, a single dad, oh, isn't that cute? Oh, he looks after his kids. He's got his kids full time. This is wonderful. But look, a single mum, welfare leech, bludger, Why'd he leave you? Haha. It's a completely different field. And for me, feminism is not about equality with men, being the same as men. It's about having equity with men.
Mm-hmm.
And, when you look at child rearing, it's not an equitable starting point. It just isn't. So, for me, the men's rights activists it's funny because now One Nation's really listening to women for the first time.
Yeah.
How long have they been around? 30 years?
Yeah, well, they're listening to women because there's obviously a market for
exactly.
it now. Okay, so.
And men agree with the things that we're saying, particularly, which is odd because, I have very, right-wing followers follow me on Twitter, and I have in my bio lefty feminist, and I have Naam, which is the Aboriginal name for Melbourne. That really triggers a lot of people. They still follow me. They still follow me, and they go, "Why got Naam there?" I go, "Because I like the Aboriginal language. I think it's great."
Yeah.
It's people are so convinced that everyone's got like hardline political views, but I don't. My views are left leaning, but I've always welcomed dialogue. And people think, I'm a feminist, I must be a man hater. There's all these cliches out there. And in a sense, like the whole trans stuff is a reinforcement of those cliches about what it is to be a man and what it is to be a woman, about being a stereotype. And until a party's willing to, a party that has the power to do something about the trans stuff, I'm not going to vote for them.
Yeah. So what would you like to see? Like, would you like to see our government come out and clearly define a man and a woman?
I don't think Labor will do that.
No,
I would love the Labor Party.
Labor would never do that.
Yeah, I would love them to, because what happened is that Labor used to represent the working class, and now they represent the elite. And the Greens are even more so. The Greens are the inner city elite. They're not the hippies and the students, because it used to be people like myself, uni students, who made up the vast majority of the Greens, and probably still does. But they're a completely different demographic. Like I was saying before, like now university is a luxury. It wasn't an everyday thing like it was for us.
Yeah.
So we've got this situation where people are still going out and working their asses off and thinking that Labor's going to represent them and they're so busy working and trying to just survive with the economy being so bad and with the cost of living that they're oblivious to what Labor's actually doing to harm them.
Yeah.
And so they don't realise that Labor, at the trade unions, they don't represent them at all. And the only part of the trade unions they represent is the ones they're doing deals with. The
money.
Because certainly when women lose their jobs for saying, I don't want that man in my toilet at work, they're not representing them.
Yeah, isn't it? It's just so fascinating to hear your views on that. And I sort of want to get into this a bit more because it seems like potentially, right, the only option for going forward for hard women rights, which is 10 to 15 years ago, you were saying that One Nation, they didn't really stand for that. They were more like the hard male right, because that's potentially a lot of their, let's say far north Queensland voters. Yes. They're quite like that. But they seem to be at the moment, and a lot of people are pushing towards that because they want this common sense like reform back to Australia. But it's interesting to hear that you won't vote for them, given that they probably would define a male and a female, and no other party would.
I'd put them a lot higher in my preferential votes. Yeah. I would have put One Nation last back in when I was Labor Green, and One Nation last, but I'd put them a bit higher.
Yeah. Okay.
The way that I vote's completely changed. Now I'm below the line, really having to think about it. And that's why I literally I walked in and went, I can't.
Yeah.
I had a really bad feeling about it. And I knew that my vote doesn't matter. I have no expectations of Labor. There's been positive signs with the Liberal Party, but with the same thing that's happening with federal Liberals is happening in Victoria. We've seen it play out there.
What's that?
Well, the Labor Lights.
The moderates.
Yeah. They will not let anyone who has conviction have any power.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I went and did a speech, my only ever public speaking gig that I've ever done. I went out and it was a rural speaking gig in the Adelaide Hills. A whole bunch of farmers came in and they invited me in to speak, and normally they only get about 50 people at these meetings. They got 350 there. And I started speaking and just sort of, broadly put out what I think is wrong with the country. It all starts from a bit of the economic issues that we're in at the moment, $1 trillion worth of debt, why our country isn't doing anything about it. And I explained all that, and then I said, and if anyone in this room thinks that Susan Lay is going to pull us out of this mess, you guys are kidding yourself. And I had 20% in the room stand up and abuse me. They started abusing me. There was one one of Susan Lay's deputies, a senator in there, got up and walked out. And I thought to myself, as I was sort of, and I wasn't blasting her. I was just saying that she can't get us out of this mess. And I thought to myself, well, if you're a senator, a sitting senator, way to go to you for listening to a person of the public with their freedom of speech about talking down on, or not even talking down. I was just criticising someone who was in a criticisable position, and I don't think her policies are correct. So, to me, and I've never been a fan of, I didn't even know the moderates existed before this happened, right? Because 80% of the room loved me. They gave me this 5-minute standing ovation at the end of the speech. But it just and this is the problem with Australian politics at the moment. These moderates, they need to get out of the Liberal Party, because Andrew Hastie comes out and speaks out against immigration. Bang, he's out, or to the backbench, or ostracised. Jacinta Price, she talks up against the Indian vote coming in, and it's 80% Labor, gets called a racist. Bang, to the backbench. It seems and people that I speak to in the South Australian Liberal Party, it's the moderates control, they're 10%, 15% of the party, but they control the party.
But why would they actually want to lead the country when they still get their $300,000, $400,000 a career reimbursed, every year, and then they're in opposition, they don't have to do anything?
Yeah.
So why would you bother?
Yeah.
These people are only in it for themselves, and you can tell the politicians, I'd like to think you can tell the politicians that are in there because they do care about social issues, because they are willing to go against what they may think the public is thinking and say, well, call things out. But, there's so many people that they get into politics and then the lifestyle corrupts them. $300,000 a year, there's a crazy amount of money that state politicians get about that. So federal politicians, what do they get? 400 plus, a year.
Yeah, I think a backbencher is on 220 grand. There was a young 21-year-old that got elected for the Labor seat in Adelaide. She's on bank 220 grand a year, backbencher. All she does is TikToks. It's embarrassing. And how
can you go back to a normal life after that? So they want to keep the gravy train going as long as they can. So they're going to go, I'm going to agree with him because he's going to take me with him, because they go around promising to each other, we'll take you with us if you vote for us. And so they get sucked in. They want to keep their paycheck coming in, and they make allegiances not on what's best for the country. They make allegiances based on what's best for them.
Yeah, and that's been happening for ages. There's so much money in politics. There's all these backstabbing weasels in there. I've often have people ask me, hey, do you want to get into politics? I'm like, no, I would.
So do I.
I would rather go to war in Afghan again than do time in politics. At least you know where the bullets are coming, right?
Yeah, no, I've been my whole life, because I was in student politics.
Yeah, okay.
I was a women's officer at university.
Yeah.
And back then we did have debates. We would have a debate night where I would have to argue with the young Liberals from, they give a topic and we'd have to argue our perspective of it. But there was respect, there'd be a lot of eye rolling and, oh, you're full of it and whatever. But there would be respect because we would try and meet in the middle. None of that exists anymore.
Yeah, and it just seems like when one side has a really good debate, the other side just starts name calling. Yeah. Transphobic, racist, Nazi, all this sort of stuff that I always get called. There's really no point, because I thought about, because people have been asking me to get into politics for years, not so much recently. Yeah. But local government even, they are divided among factions of Labor voters, whatever, because local government is now a springboard into state government. So they're not there for the people that they represent in their community. They're all there because it's a springboard to something else. And you get elected, and if you're an independent, you have no voice. Yeah. Did you see Peter Malinauskas came out the other month with any candidate, independent MP can no longer take any individual donations over $5,000. And everyone's like, this is awesome, taking the money out of Parliament. But in reality, it's like, no, you're just making it so the two-party system now is in forever, because their funding comes from your last election's results. So if Labor gets most of the funding, they get millions of dollars of taxpayer funding. And I think, what is it? The Labor Party spent $140 million over 2 years on ad campaigns and marketing, all that sort of stuff, advertising. So now a candidate that wants to come up as independent, well, they're capped at $5,000 worth of donations. It's like, guys, this isn't fair. And this two-party system just keeps rolling in. And I think that's the vicious cycle we're in. So when you come back to like we need to start voting outside the system. I think that's why a lot of people were going like, well, I'm going to move to One Nation now, because even the polls are starting to show that, right?
Yep.
So like everyone's just abandoning the Liberal Party because they just feel like they're abandoning the people, which they are massively, because there is no opposition in this country, so Albo can do whatever he wants all the time. But it's interesting. I would love to see a vote One Nation.
See, I live in the country, and I have grown to quite like the National Party. I don't know why.
Yeah.
But,
yeah.
you know, they talk fairly straight about things. You know, they're probably leaning on the conservative side.
Yeah.
But, yeah, when it comes to sort of the grassroots stuff that matter to me, they seem to be paying attention, probably because they're coming from opposition. But, you know, so, yeah, I've been quite impressed. And they were the first party who would, like, come out and agree with us about the problem that this trans thing caused for women-only spaces, the National Party.
Yeah.
Yeah, before the Liberals. Now, all the Liberals are putting their hands up and going, we agree with the women, but the Nats were the ones that started it.
Yeah. But even now, though, it seems to be just taken too far, and not even the Liberal Party and the Conservatives. Everyone's quiet about it.
Yeah.
Everyone's quiet about it because they're afraid of losing their job.
Well, we had an interesting experience this morning. We did some turfing. Did some turfing, but we took our banners down to Parliament and to Peter Malinaskis's office, and we stood outside Parliament with signs, no men in women's prisons, and we held them up. And a lot of people looked at us, and some of them sort of went thumbs up. Some sort of looked confused. But the vast majority looked down like they'd seen something they weren't meant to see. Oh, I don't want to. There's a culture of fear about having any position on the trans stuff, because people naturally know that it is wrong to have a man, or any man, because any man can identify as trans, any man be in a female-only space, in a confined female-only space, like a prison, a rape crisis centre, a homelessness service, and all of these places that have now been invaded by men. People instinctively know that that is wrong. So rather than say, I think it's wrong, and get absolutely swamped with people calling them bigots, Nazis, whatever, they look away and they go, I can't deal with this. And the politicians do that too. They go, oh, I don't know what you're talking about. This is not an issue that is on my radar, and things like that. It's because they're terrified. They're absolutely terrified of being called all of those things.
Yeah, I actually stopped. I leant away from talking out against this stuff earlier on in the piece because I was afraid of it. I'm like, screw this. Screw these people. Like, and, you know, if I want to put my head down on the pillow at night, I need to know that I've spoken the truth and everything. And it's really interesting, though, the ones where I do speak up against trans and women and stuff like that, it just doesn't seem to be picked up as much on my algorithm feeds. People seem to be, or they don't want to be seen to liking the post or commenting on the post, which as a society, I mean, man, we have been somehow cordoned into thinking that, you're a bad person for speaking out against this stuff. Now, you said that you went and stood in front of Peter Malinowski's office there. I know for a fact that we have women, or we have men, identifying men in women's prisons in South Australia. The same thing in New South Wales, and the same thing in Victoria. I don't know about Queensland and Perth, but I do know about Northern Territory. They came up and the one in Perth, so Perth as well. I do know that the Northern Territory came out this week and said we are going to take these men out of female prisons. I mean, I'm really hoping this is a movement forward to cleansing female prisons of biological males. But I really think that's a good step. Is this something that, obviously you went and stood up and tried to, push the Malinowski government for that this morning? Is this something that you want to see, obviously, go back to normality? We've
been protesting on this for years and years and years.
How long is it? Oh, so this isn't just a recent thing.
This is probably 20 years.
20 years?
More, even more maybe. We don't know. But, I've been aware of it since 2014 that there were men in prisons, in Victorian women's prisons.
Wow.
And because just to be admitted to a female prison, on the paperwork, he's put down as female. So when you do a freedom of information asking how many men are in women's prisons, none.
Yeah.
And it was a trans-identifying man who went through a male's prison, in a men's prison, who advocated with us back in the day to find out how many men were in women's prisons, because even as him, as a big bloke in a wig and a dress was horrified at the thought, having been a prisoner himself, horrified at the thought of having male criminals in female prisons. So he did all these freedom of informations. He went and advocated, and he tried to find out how many men were in women's prisons, and he got stonewalled. It was like, no.
Did you hear about the guy? I think it might have been in Seattle, or a very blue state over in America, where during the Biden-Harris administration, he went into a female prison and got like 3 ladies pregnant.
Yeah.
During the time in there. And
yeah.
I'm like,
well,
how is this happening?
Yes, women, there's been quite a few women are sexually assaulted in Australian prisons.
By biological males?
By biological males.
Wow.
I think there's one, was it here in South Australia? I think this is the reason it's a flashpoint here, because there was a woman here who got out of prison and then started talking about it. But no, there's been numerous. It's funny because when you've been in this battle, like, people say, oh, there's this thing that happened. And it's like, well, hang on, hasn't that been happening for 10, 15 years, you know? Yeah. But yeah, the men in women's prison thing doesn't really resonate with people because they think they're criminals. So they're criminals, so it doesn't matter what happens to women. But, women are in prison for some of the same reasons that men are, for things like, white-collar fraud. Mm. So does a woman who has defrauded her employer of $500,000, does she deserve to get raped? Mm. No. No. There's women in there because they have been experiencing family violence and they've killed the perpetrator. Mm-hmm. Does she deserve to be raped? No. Or to be intimidated? Should any woman have to have a shower in front of a man? No. Mm. And I'd like to think there's no male prison guards in the showers with women either. We don't know. But, people lack empathy for them because they think, well, Aaron Patterson, the mushroom killer's in Dame Phyllis Frost, and so is the pedophile. Who cares? And it's like, even the worst women, people like Aaron Patterson, the mushroom murderer, she doesn't deserve to be raped, and she doesn't deserve to be raped and imprisoned with her rapist. Mm. So that issue, it hasn't resonated until now that this male pedophile who raped his own 5-year-old daughter is in the prison. Now people care because of the victim, not the women.
Yeah, and I also think as well that trans is at the front of everyone's mind at the moment, and it was like a trans story, and then it went back to Jacinta Allen, and everyone hates her, so everyone started talking about it a bit more. But I'm not glad this happened, but I'm glad that it is now fronting on everyone's mind. So even I came out and spoke out against it. Yeah,
everyone isn't talking about it. It's only people that watch Sky, are on Twitter, or they read the right-leaning media like The Australian. Mm. If you are an Age or Guardian reader who watches the ABC, you would not know. Mm. And the problem with all this gender stuff is the ideological capture of the ABC. Australians are so behind everything because unless they're on social media, and particularly Twitter, where this stuff is talked about, you just don't know what's happening. They don't know about the Cass Review in the UK and what that said about the dangers of transitioning kids. They don't know about the male pedophiles in women's jails. They don't know that men are invading all these, places that are deeply personal. They have a sense of it because, 20, 30 years ago, hospital words were single sex, and now they're all mixed sex, and all the toilets have been removed, and now they're all unisex. So they know something's not right, but they don't really know the extent of it, and it's all in the legislation, and it's all in the judiciary, and it's all in the police, and they don't know the institutional capture, and they don't know that LGBTQI organisation that was originally set up for men who had AIDS and who doesn't support those men has now flipped to the AWEI DEI program. That institution is now controlling content on ABC Australia.
Is it really?
Well, 3 years ago this week, Media Watch did a story on the ideological capture of the ABC by ACON, which is AIDS Council of Australia. Now, I've got friends who are HIV positive, and the AIDS Council of Australia does not support men with AIDS. So if you're middle-aged and you've had HIV for 10, 15 years, and in middle age, symptoms quite often present because, as you get older, get a bit achy and painy or whatever, and they are struggling with life stuff and they need a little bit of help to stay at work or whatever, and they approach the AIDS Council of Australia. They say, look, go to aged care. They'll say to a 50-year-old man who's got some health concerns, go to aged care or the NDIS because we can't help you. And they're completely pivoted to being about AWEI, which is a points program that all the major government and businesses are part of. And there's another TERF called Kit Kowalski, who's an expert on this. I'm by no means an expert, but they basically get points for every pro-trans thing that they do, and they get points removed if they say something anti-trans. And it's all of their tick boxes of diversity and inclusion. And it's funny because, all of the other diverse people, except for transvestites, aren't included. It's all about the trans. It's not even about the gay or the lesbian or anyone else. It's all about the queer and the trans. Guess who is leading the AWEI leaderboard? Out of all the companies you can think of, all the government,
ABC.
That's it. Yeah. So
we need to defund the ABC.
Well, that's right. But since the ABC did that one thing on Media Watch, we were all like, hallelujah! Finally, something has cracked at the ABC, where they're finally admitting that lobbyists are controlling their content. Yeah. And since then, they've doubled down. Now all they do is the trans stuff.
Of course.
Yeah, and it's funny because there's some of the federal politicians have been talking about looking into lobbying and its influence on government.
Yeah, there's David Pocock.
Yeah, Pocock particularly, and I think Monique Ryan or someone like that. And they've been talking about that. And if you get in their comments on Twitter and go, what about ACON and the ABC? Silence. Yeah. They can't admit it. They can't look at it. They can't even think about it.
Yeah. It's the ABC has tried to defund or defame a lot of Australian soldiers, and not really fans of them at all. So it just seems to be this left-wing propaganda piece that they're just it's not. The ABC is funded by the people for the people. They need to be, and I agree that a news resource like the ABC needs to exist, right? Apart from any government or anyone pulling the strings, they need to be able to investigate anyone from anywhere on any side and be able to run a story on them, separate from government. But now it just seems like someone's pulling the strings behind the scene, where they're only allowed to talk about one certain amount of issues, or then they're allowed to talk about trans stuff, but then they're not allowed to talk about masculine male stuff. It's just it's just weird. It's and it just shows that there's something controlling government behind the scenes, who control media outlets. Controlling media outlets by governments has been a tactical play since the start of time. The Romans used to do it, control newspapers, and then it went on to, Alexander the Great was the same with propaganda campaigns. The Nazis were great with Hitler with propaganda campaigns, and Churchill was also great at propaganda campaigns. It's always been a part of government, but in a day and age now where so many, I think Australians are really big TV watchers.
Yeah, but see, during COVID, all we had was the internet and TV, and that's where most of this stuff took hold. It was already in the works beforehand. Like self-ID in Victoria came through in 2017, but we didn't see the result of it until after COVID. And so many young people particularly were indoctrinated during COVID. It just was devastating. And that's when all the media agencies also started to be more upfront about the issues. And they began to lie. Like COVID was when it became obvious they were lying. And obvious they weren't accountable for lying. Yeah. Now, I was a Dan Stan. I was totally COVID compliant right up until there was that incident in Melbourne at the Shrine. And the only reason...
What was that incident?
Well, there'd been a anti-lockdown protest, and the protesters had been corralled down to the Shrine, which I didn't agree with them going to the Shrine. I thought it was disrespectful. But police opened fire with rubber bullets on the protesters.
Yeah, I know that one. Yep.
And that I watched it on Ruckshan's footage, who I used to think was far right. I've since apologised. I do approach people that I used to call far right and think were far right, and I say, look, I'm sorry, But I watched Ruckshan's footage, and he's
the Indian guy, isn't
he? And he was actually his footage of our event, the Let Women Speak event, that John Pizzuto defamed all of us, and Dan Andrews said we were no better than the Nazis. It was Ruckshan's footage that vindicated us, because it showed that we had nothing to do with them.
Yeah.
Because the media were there all day for us, just as they were there all day for COVID. But the mainstream media only showed you what they wanted you to see.
Always.
And the citizen journalists showed what actually happened.
Yeah.
And so I was peaked during COVID after I'd had my 2 vaxxers and a booster, and I'd had all my children vaccinated because they had to attend childcare if I had to work. and I'd had a bad feeling about the vaccine, like a lot of people. But I believed Dan, and I believed what the ABC and all the experts said. And I peaked in the middle of COVID, where everything came apart. And then afterwards, and particularly for us after the Let Women Speak event, where we had the same experiences of COVID people, the anti-COVID people, lockdown people, we had the same experience as them, and then completely like, I'm a cooker now. Call me far right, don't care. Call me bigot, call me transphobe, don't care. Because I'd seen what the institutions were doing, that they were literally lying blatantly, using our national broadcaster for really evil propaganda, and I saw it for what it was. There was no doubt anymore. And I think most people just follow along like sheep, and they're not on social media, they're not looking at independent media, they're not looking at citizen journalists because of the stigma that the institutions have created about that. Like don't watch this person because he's far right, when they're not. They're just turning up and filming what's happening on the day.
This is slowly starting to change, though.
It is.
It's slowly starting to change. My page was fully throttled, right? And I talk about the Biden-Harris administration and the Trump-Vance administration. There has been a clear change into my accounts across all platforms being throttled and shadow banned.
Wow.
So I was shadow banned heavily in the Biden-Harris administration. It was like 2 weeks after Trump took office. He's obviously said something to Zuckerberg, and all of a sudden I got taken off shadow ban, and my numbers went from 100,000 a month to millions. And then I got followers just unreal, and everything started to explode. So it was actually like Trump took office, he said something to Zuckerberg, which has been noted on the Joe Rogan podcast with him, that they were asking to suppress certain accounts all around the world. So obviously I just got umbrellaed under that.
Yeah.
And then it sort of came out. And this has also been the rise of my social media channels, is that it's now getting put into algorithms that wasn't, and it just shows that it also was all like government somehow control social media algorithms and platforms from behind the scenes. I mean, I've done some posts sometimes, and they've done nothing in the first, not nothing, they've done something in the first week or two, and then it would be like there would be an incident, let's say Melbourne, with a machete attack. Then all of a sudden, all my machete attack stuff has just went throttled through the roof.
I just don't know how Twitter works particularly, because sometimes I get great reach and sometimes I get 4 people liking my content. I think Australia accounts are being attacked. I think someone is suppressing Australian accounts that don't have the approved views.
Karen.
Yeah,
she's all over it.
I don't see Australian content in my feed, and I'm in Australia engaging with people. I have to, if I want to see your content, sometimes they come up, but most of the time I have to go to your page to look at it. And it's the same with people that I have interactions with every day. I have to go and search them out to see their current content. I'll get something a day, 2 days later will come up, and it's too late to respond to that. So I think there is definitely something happening with Australian accounts, and even on Twitter, which is meant to be the free speech platform. Yeah,
I totally agree. I started all my platforms relatively at the same time. Apart from Facebook, I only started that a few weeks ago because I realised you could monetize off it maybe a month ago. So my Instagram's at something like 200 and something thousand. Facebook's at 60,000. TikTok's at 60,000. Twitter, 14,000.
Yep.
And I'm like, hang on. Like, this should be getting, my other platforms grew enormously. But I definitely think there's something behind Twitter. And Twitter seems to, people got to realise as well, Twitter's not Australia. It's only a very small percentage of Australia, but it represents probably the right-leaning Australia. It's definitely in my feed anyway, and I think there is a massive suppression on that. It's funny because I get all left-leaning stuff, and I even though most of them nicked off to Blue Sky, but I see mostly I think left-leaning content on Twitter. Okay. Yeah. Facebook, I had so many bans for calling men, and using for calling trans men. Trans women to men. I called Laurel Hubbard a man, and I had a ban for like a month. So all my bans have been on Facebook. I did get the day John Pizzuto defamed me, my Twitter was taken down. Yeah. And Graham Linehan in the UK got it back. Yeah. I'm forever indebted to him. I was just nobody in Australia, and I literally wrote, I was just defamed, and my Twitter went black. Of course it did. And like that cannot be coordinated from the government to big business and social media. Point in case. So there's the Labor and Liberal Party, obviously, in South Australia. Now there's this new movement. It's called Turning Point SA.
Yeah, I've seen that.
Yeah. So these guys, and I don't have anything to do with them, but I know George and I also know Jamal over in Sydney. They had their social media page taken down after 24 hours. Their one on Instagram.
Wow.
And they came out and they said, this is our new movement, this is our new party. 24 hours later, bang, page was down on Instagram. And both Peter Malinowskis and Vincent Tarzia, they both condemned the new party, saying that votes are won in the centre of politics, not on the far right. And we don't want any American-type politics coming into Australia. And yeah, the page got taken down. I'm like, guys, this isn't freedom. This isn't a democracy. No.
The thing about Charlie Kirk, though, like he was like the young Liberals guys I used to debate at uni. He was like a bit doofusy, sometimes got it a bit wrong, but he was not like a far right. He was just a doofusy conservative, right, to me. And that's the most horrifying thing about what they did to him, was that he's not even an extremist. He's a Christian conservative, and they killed him.
Yeah.
And the fact that they can say he was far right...
Yeah.
They obviously don't know anything about politics, because the far right and that are two completely different things.
Yeah, people don't understand that what's standing behind, I don't know if you know Nick Fuentes.
Sadly, yes.
Yeah, but what's standing behind Charlie Kirk is Nick Fuentes. Like if you kill Charlie Kirk, that opens the door to everyone to go to Nick Fuentes. That's just a fact. That's a fact. I mean, if you've ever watched like him or not, kid is talented. Extremely talented. Have you ever watched his interview with Candace Owens?
No, I've watched about 5 minutes bits of him because I can't stomach him. But if I think with someone who's such a unlikable character can build such a huge profile, that he must have something going for him.
I also think as well that this is the current state. So he has only risen up because the current state of the world has pushed men to a point where they've told him they're useless and all this sort of stuff, and he's just come out and been like, okay, I'm going to say it how it is. That's why I always say the rise up of not even the rise up, right, the formation of the Nazis over in Melbourne, and this Nazi movement in the low key of everywhere else. This has only happened because governments have pushed people too far left, I think.
Yeah, I agree.
Right,
no, but I don't see that they've pushed them too far left. I think that they've
moved away from common sense.
Yeah, they've shifted the goalposts for good values.
Correct.
To being a virtue signaller and not a hard worker. To being a virtue signaller and not being a family man, or they've really shifted to something that I don't think what they represent is the left. And maybe I'm wrong, because maybe I'm a bit biased because I was from the left. But what the left represent now, I don't recognise.
Yeah.
It's something that's just anti anything that is normal and good.
Yeah. And you're right. I had this discussion with a mate the other day. It's not like the people haven't shifted. It's the goalposts that have shifted, like the political goalpost of our government that have shifted. Like men from 10 years ago are now far right, but they're just normal people, right? But this is this rise up of Nick Fuentes, because he's like, well, he was saying what some men were saying 10 years ago, but he just articulates it very well. But a lot of people are like, well, he's the only one that speaks for me now. There's no other person that speaks for me. I mean, Charlie did, they killed him. Yeah. And now it pushes people to like a Nick Fuentes. I mean, it's just, I mean, I watched his hour and a half rant after Charlie died, and it was challenge to you, watch it. It was one of the greatest hour and a half bits of internet what do you call it, like internet art I've ever seen.
Wow.
He just freestyled for an hour and a half in front of a camera, no one around, put it, and it was live on Rumble. So he did really, it was one of the greatest internet pieces I've ever seen in my life. So
I think the thing that to me illustrates what the left have become, treaty, Aboriginal rights, a massive issue for the left, particularly here in Australia. The Voice, massive, Labor and Greens. Who are overrepresented in women's prisons? Aboriginal women. Who are they putting male rapists in with? Aboriginal women. To me, that more than many things represents the modern left.
Yeah.
It's all talk, no teeth. It's just virtue signalling. It makes me so angry. It makes me really angry when, my dad was a unionist.
Yeah. Does it make you disappointed to see what the Labor Party has become? Like, would your dad be...
My dad would be disappointed. I'm angry.
Yeah.
I'm angry at what they've become because they've destroyed feminism, like the meaning of the word feminism. They've platformed people like Clementine Ford and Van Badham who don't have women's, what's best for women at heart. They have themselves and their follow accounts at heart. And they've convinced people that that's what feminism is. So people have naturally turned against feminism. They've platformed people that they say represent Aboriginal people, who represent a minority of Aboriginal people who live in the city. So they're saying that they're platforming, a certain thing, and what they're actually doing is the opposite.
Let me ask you a question, and I talk to friends about this all the time. I love their feedback on it. Now, you said that you didn't really, or like you voted, but you found it very hard. Do you think that Australia, at the next coming election or whatever, do you think we can vote our way out of this?
We should be able to, but I think most people are so frightened of the alternative to Labor, and they think of Liberals, it's Liberals and Labor, and that's a choice. And they're so afraid of, sort of a right-wing Christian, extremism that they've been convinced that the Liberals represent, even though they don't represent that, they represent the moderates who are Labor light. But people think that by voting Liberal, that they're voting for something that like the right-wing Christian values, so they won't vote Liberal. So they stick with what they know. And then the people who are more educated go, well, I can't vote Liberal because they're just Labor light, so I may as well vote Labor. So we're in this loop that sends everyone back to Labor. They're either too afraid to vote for them or they don't see the point of voting for the Liberals. And so what happens then is everyone votes for the minor parties and all the preferences go back to Labor. So we're in this loop, and it's going to take someone to radically revolutionise the Liberal Party to give people a viable alternative. But that's going to take the next 3 years, so they better damn well hurry up. And Susan Lay's not that person.
Who do you think is?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I like Jacinta Price.
I do as well.
I will get shot for that, but I do like her.
Yeah, I've been in discussion with her. She's going to come on the podcast eventually.
Ooh.
Yeah.
They're excellent.
Yeah.
No, I do like her. I think she's very common sense. Obviously, I don't agree with everything she says, but I think that she's rock solid. And it also, the beauty of her is that she dispels this myth that the Liberals are far right because she's an Aboriginal woman, Yeah. And if people are prepared to vote for her, then they're not radical right-wingers.
Yeah.
Because the real far right will not vote for a woman, and particularly not an Aboriginal woman.
Well, that's the old school far right.
Well, that's who the Labor think that the average, conservative is now.
Yeah.
They think they're the same thing.
Yeah, and again, it's not the people that have shifted, it's the political goalposts that have shifted.
Yeah. And it's the rubbish that they're fed by the ABC and the mainstream media.
Yeah, I don't watch any news anymore. I also don't scroll on my phone because I see a whole bunch of people bullying me online with clips and that, so I don't scroll anymore. But so I live a bit of a different life. But I know that my mum watches the ABC, but my mum's a very very clued on lady. She questions a lot of stuff as well. She'd be like, yeah, you should have seen this on the ABC the other day. Pays them out. But I think there's too many people that watch the ABC, and I think I have a friend that is in the military, was in the military, coming out and doing a uni degree, and he said that he got handed a bit of paper the other day that said why is communism the preferred political method, and then they had like this China this piece on China about how they're run so well over there. And he said, mate, these kids coming out right now of uni, they think fascism is the full right, and they are willing to absolutely do anything in their power to stop that. Like they think the Liberals are fascists.
They do.
And it's wild, the brainwashing that's happening in universities.
But they can think, they thought that us feminists were Nazis. They thought we were affiliated with, I mean, just common sense. Nazis and women, no. And our rally was...
When was this, in 2023?
Yeah, 2023. Greens voting, lesbian feminists were the majority of the women who supported our event. And they still managed to convince a large chunk of society that we were affiliated with the far right, because a woman from overseas who they know nothing about, someone said that she did an interview with someone who interviewed someone else who was a Nazi.
So what happened at that event? Just explain it to me, because from my memory, it was like a women's rights event. It
was about the trans stuff, called Let Women Speak. We had been campaigning, first it started with the feminists, and like the separatist feminists and the lesbian feminists had been, trying to get men out of their spaces even before governments started talking about the prospect of men being able to self-identify. And around 2014, I heard that self-ID was coming in Victoria. And it worried me because it meant that any man can claim that he's a woman. And I was sort of lurking in feminist circles, still busy with my children were very young then, so I was still, mostly not political. I was just really concerned about the sort of, men being in domestic violence services and things like that. And so we had started lobbying and campaigning, and we were just getting trans women and women and all this rubbish back at us, or politicians refusing to engage with us. And that went on for years, and self-ID came in 2017. And we noticed pretty early on bad things started to happen, that there were reports like of the sexual assaults in women's prisons, like reports of men going into places and men, just turning up in workplaces one day saying, I'm trans now, you've got to change everything, And so really early on, we were getting reports that the trans lobby had encouraged men to just say, I'm trans, So we did all this lobbying, and we weren't getting anywhere. And Kelly J. Keane had built quite an online platform, particularly in the UK, speaking in very, very plain terms about the threat that men who identify as trans pose to women. Mm-hmm. And she talked about coming out. And there was real division in the women who thought about this issue at the time, because she's very, very raw and upfront, and she'd had a falling out with some of the left-wing feminists in the UK because they criticised her as, right-wing. And that sort of came over to the feminists here, where some people go, we can't work with her because she's, associated with right-wing. There's no explanation of this association. And then some others, and I was part of this group, thought, we are going around in circles here. We're getting nowhere. Maybe if this woman comes out and we have one of her events and we all go and we talk about this, people will finally listen to us. And so Kelly J said to come out to Australia because she wanted to build her following too. And also a lot of people in the UK, because we have no platform here. We still don't, apart from Twitter. And Sal Grover's built, now Sal and Sky News is having us on, but, the most of us still, we're just...
I like Sal.
Yeah, I do too.
I like that.
So we had no one. No one would publish our articles. But journalists were losing jobs for trying to publish on this issue. So when Kelly J came out, it was like, yeah, let's go with it. Let's have this woman, regardless of what people think of her, she's loud, she's out there, and she might just shock people into waking up about what's actually happening. And when it was built that she'd come out, of course, the Antifa crowd who protested against, Candace Owen and Jordan Peterson and Milo and everybody else.
The Antifa
that crowd, who I used to be a part of, mind you.
Yeah.
I protest against Milo coming out. So I've agreed with a lot of their views in the past, what they used to represent, because I've had a bit of trouble with, Nazis attacking me. That's what's so horrific to me, that I've been likened to them because they're abhorrent to me. Yeah. So they got wind that Kelly J was coming out because it was on social media, and they put up signs all over Melbourne saying far right Nazi coming out, let's bash the fash, meaning the women, because we're a bunch of feminists, the old fashioned feminists, and we were going to have this event, and so we did. We said stuff it, the Antifa's going to come and protest us. And because I'd been part of the anti-fascist movement, I thought to myself, well, if someone puts up a sign inviting the Nazis to come, the Gronks might just turn up, but we'll ignore them. It wasn't an issue. So we held our event. The media was there they were all over us, filming us. And I thought, wow, that Channel 9's here, the ABC's here, everyone's here, they're going to film us. And people are going to hear what we're going to say. And halfway through, a policeman comes and taps me on the shoulder and says, and pointed, and the police were letting these men behind the barrier way off in the distance, because I was one of the organisers. And I'm looking over there and I went, shit, that's Antifa. Because Antifa in the US,
they wear black.
We're all black.
Yeah.
And these guys were in all black. They're in short shorts, which was a bit weird, but they were in all black. And so we were all going, Antifa's here, Antifa's here. The police are letting them in. What are we going to do? And we were worried that we were going to get bashed by anti-fascists at our own event. And so we were all running around doing that. And that was, there was loud. They were chanting and screaming over there, the trans activists who vastly outnumbered us. And our event was loud, and it was loud and chaotic, and there was police everywhere. And we were trying to get through that Antifa are here and get it up to Kelly J to warn her, because she obviously was the biggest target. And that's all we knew. And then we saw them being led out by the police doing the Hitler... Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
The sun was in my eyes.
Yeah,
but doing the salute.
Yeah.
And we were like, what the... And we go, no, because they look like a theatre troupe.
Yeah.
No. What was that? Because it looked so out of place. Because, Nazis used to rampage around Melbourne in the 90s. And they used to get on trams in their skinhead outfits.
Romper stomper.
Yeah. Romper stomper is how you think of a neo-Nazi. And so, or the bonehead ones around Melbourne at the time who were just bogan, whatever. And so we never really thought they were Nazis, because they didn't look like Nazis, and it just was such a bizarre thing. Why would they be behind the line? They'd be on the other side of the line. And then we went and packed up and went off and had a debrief, which some of it was filmed, and it became the notorious champagne video where Kelly J. Keane, Moira Deeming, myself and Catherine Deeves were talking about our event and how successful it had been because all the media had been there. And for a brief moment, we talked about those Nazis. And I did this, and that was actually brought up in court with John Pizzuto. Nazis, because we still weren't sure. And then after the champagne video, we turned the news on. And there was Dan Andrews saying that we were the same as the Nazis. And there was the images of the sign that they'd unfurled on the steps. And this is the first we'd seen of it. We hadn't seen the signs.
I got a question. Do you think that this was set up? Do you think the police let them in on purpose?
No, I don't think the police did. I think that Dan Andrews saw an opportunity and used it. So
Okay.
I think the police were completely ill-prepared.
You don't think it was coordinated? Dan Andrews just took the opportunity to label you Nazis?
Yes.
Yeah.
And he took the opportunity. He saw, went, woohoo. But they had the footage. They knew we had nothing to do with them because all of the media was on us. And then when those men were led in the line and they unfurled the banner on the steps, the media ran over there and they disappeared and we never saw them. And so when we saw on the news that they were legit Nazis, we're going, oh, okay, shorts. And then and Dan Andrews condemned us. We were like, what? Then they're going to link us to them? They were nowhere near us. And then, of course, John Pizzuto came out and agreed with Dan Andrews, condemned Moira, called Kelly J, and myself, an old school lefty who had never, who was actually actively fighting a Nazi in court, called me a Nazi. Like, it was just insane. But it was obvious to everyone that they had nothing to do with us. And common sense would be like, what would Nazis and women's rights? But nobody ever said, oh, we watched the footage of Kelly J's event. Nobody ever referred to what the event was about. They just lied. And so whenever someone would say something to me, I'd say, watch the footage.
Yeah.
Watch the footage. And nobody did. None of the journalists watched it. And if they did, they weren't allowed to comment on it. Because if they watched it, they would have seen grassroots feminism. They would have seen women saying, I'm worried about women trapped in jails with male rapists. I'm worried about men in rape crisis centres when women are vulnerable, or domestic violence services or homeless services. I'm worried that our society is being going from male and female services to unisex everything, and the impact that has on vulnerable women. It was just grassroots feminism. A little few expletives and stuff, because this stuff makes us really, really angry. But it was not anything like they described. And the evidence was there all along. But the media went with the opposite. And to this day, they call us far right. Because I spoke to a journalist the other day, and she said, how would you like to describe yourself? And I'd say, a women's rights advocate. And she put Angie Jones, who had a podcast called Turf Talk Down Under. I haven't done an episode for 2.5 years. 2 years, I haven't done an episode. And it's like they can't call me a women's rights activist, because then I'll be representing women's rights. They have to call me anti-trans, far right. Like they have to use something that, because they try so hard to make sure nobody listens to us. Because as soon as they do, they wake up and they go, what? 15-year-old girls are having their breasts removed as patients of the Children's Hospital? Yeah. No. Here's the evidence. What? Kids can transition at schools against their parents' wishes and behind their parents' back, and the teachers have to hide it. It's legislated in education department documents. Yes.
Wow.
Yes. And they, like you, wow, what? No, they don't believe it.
Wow.
You have to show the evidence.
That blows my mind. It blows my mind. It also makes me think there's some medical industry behind it where people are getting paid for this.
They're making a fortune out of it.
Yeah.
And Dr. Telfer, who runs the gender clinic in Melbourne, which is the leading one for Australia, which is a copy of the Tavistock in the UK, which was closed down. She's just been nominated for a Human Rights Award.
Yuck.
Because there's all these accolades and there's money and big pharma's behind it, of course.
Of course they are.
Big pharmaceutical companies. And it's really sad, because when I think about children who are struggling, because like they might be autistic, right? Kids has behavioural problems at school, can't do the work, can't settle down, ADHD, autistic, whatever, struggling at home, struggling at school. Mum's doing the best that she can, but she feels overwhelmed. Nobody's helping. And she thinks, how can I get some help here? This kid's out of control. I don't know what to do. Kid discovers trans. I think I'm trans. That kid goes from being the problem kid to the golden egg. And that is so appealing for mum who's overwhelmed. We've got a community for you. We'll guide your child through this whole thing. And if you don't affirm your child's going to die. So if you're a good mum, and she goes, great, I can be a good mum. That really sums up the trans movement.
Yeah.
And how they prey on people who are vulnerable, and they groom them, and they get sucked into this thing. And they don't realise that the promises at the other side are empty, that the child has to become sterile and mutilate their body and, go through the trauma of detransition, or worse, suicide, or live as an adult who finally has a mental breakdown and understands that they've changed absolutely nothing. Which I know some people who've been, transitioned for 30 years who have had a crisis after every surgery and all the medication, and who've realised, I can never go back. So I'm just going to have to live like this.
Yeah, it seems like at the moment as well. I don't know if you've ever looked into Hollywood, the amount of Hollywood stars with trans kids, and they're always like let's get the movement going in Hollywood so we can convince the people that this is the right thing to do. And then you look at the medical industry, like pharmaceutical world, geez, they've been around for decades, never ever cured a single cure or never cured anything. They've always just had the pill form to keep you on their system and their money corrupted plate, which continually feeds you these drugs that just doesn't get you right. It just postpones or makes you feel good for a little bit. And then obviously there's the medical world behind that, where these people are getting paid enormous amounts of money to chop the little boys' penises off and shit like that. So it's just, to me, and it happens with everything, when money gets involved, greed gets involved, and decisions are made not for the welfare for the child. I mean, that's just a fact.
Yep. And the parent, once they put their child in this thing, get all the support that they've never had. And then the grifters come in from the NDIS, or the grifters come in and you know, make money off that trans kid in other ways, not just through the medicalisation. But, you know, because that child usually becomes dependent and on the system, you know, not just the medical system, often the welfare system, because they're, you know, mentally unwell and become unemployable. You know, it's just sad. The whole thing's just sad.
Well, I really, really appreciate you coming on, and you know, I just want to also thank you for the work that you do as well. I mean, we might not politically align, but I definitely like agree with your stance on women's rights and keeping males out of these spaces. And I really tip my hat to you and say well done, and keep going. If you're ever back in Adelaide, let's do another podcast.
Oh, thank you. I'm glad this wasn't a trap, because I've seen some of your previous guests and thought, why does he want me on here? No, I'm glad I came along.
No, thank you very much. Thanks for tuning in to Two Worlds Collide podcast. If you want to support what I'm doing, you can grab some merch or jump on my Patreon program. Both links are in the description. Until next week, take care, guys.